The first time I saw her smile like that, I wasn't the reason. It was her phone. It was a smile that used to be reserved for me, for moments of shared joy or quiet intimacy. Now it was just for a screen and a conversation I wasn't a part of. Maya and I had been together for 8 years. 8 good years. We'd met in college, navigated our 20s side by side, and bought a house together just 3 years ago. We talked about kids, about renovating the kitchen, about growing old in that house. She was my rock, my best friend, the woman I thought knew me better than anyone. Our connection felt deep, rooted in shared history, and a quiet understanding that didn't need constant words. But sometime in the last few months, that understanding had frayed. It wasn't a sudden break, more like a slow, almost imperceptible unraveling. At first, I blamed work. She's an architect, and her projects often demanded long hours and intense focus. She'd come home exhausted, sometimes still tapping away on her laptop or fielding calls. I tried to be supportive, to give her space. I'd cook dinner, clean up, and try to keep things calm so she could decompress. I knew what professional pressure felt like. The phone started small, a quick check during dinner, a few texts before bed. Normal stuff, I told myself. Everyone is glued to their devices these days. But then it started to creep into every available moment. Early mornings, before I was even fully awake, I'd hear the quiet tapping and see the faint glow from her side of the bed. Late evenings, after we'd settled in for a show, her eyes would drift, her thumb would twitch, and soon she was back on the screen, her face illuminated by that cool, blue light. I remember thinking, initially, that she was just keeping up with industry news, or maybe planning something for us, a surprise trip or a gift. I tried to rationalize it. We all have our little escape hatches, right? Mine was usually the garage, tinkering with my old car. Hers was her phone, but my escape was solitary. Hers seemed incredibly social. The conversations between us grew shorter, punctuated by her glances at the screen. Sometimes I'd ask her a question, and she'd respond with a distracted, or, "What was that?" It wasn't intentional rudeness, but it felt like I was competing for her attention with something invisible, something always just out of reach. I'd try to tell her about my day, and her eyes would be on her phone, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips, a smile that wasn't for me. I missed her. I missed the way she used to lean into me on the couch, her head on my shoulder, fully present. I missed our late-night talks, where we'd dissect our days, our dreams, our worries. Now those moments felt forced, or non-existent. When I'd reach for her hand, she'd often be holding her phone. When I'd try to start a conversation, her attention was usually split. One evening I made her favorite meal, pasta primavera, her special request. We sat at the kitchen island, a place we usually reserved for long, unhurried dinners. I'd even put on some jazz music, trying to set a mood. She ate slowly, methodically, but her phone was propped up against her water glass. Every few minutes it would light up, and her eyes would dart down. She'd pick it up, type a quick response, and then set it back down, almost apologetically. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. She sighed, a small, tired sound. "Just work stuff, you know how it is." I didn't know how it was. My work stuff didn't demand constant, immediate attention during dinner. My work stuff didn't make her face light up with that private joy. My work stuff didn't make her pull her phone away from me as if shielding it from view when I leaned closer. That became another habit. If I was too close, or if I asked who she was texting, she'd quickly angle the screen away or pull the phone closer to her body, almost defensively. She'd say it was just colleagues, or her sister, or something equally innocuous, but the action itself felt guarded. Why hide it? If it was harmless, why the quick, almost furtive movements? My own thoughts started to feel like a betrayal. Was I being paranoid? Was I insecure? She was under a lot of pressure, I reminded myself. Maybe she needed that digital escape, that little bubble of privacy. Maybe I was just being needy, clinging to a past version of our relationship that simply couldn't exist anymore with her demanding career. I tried to push down the unease, to give her the benefit of the doubt, to trust her implicitly. That's what a good partner does, right? But the unease kept growing, like a stubborn weed. It wasn't just the phone use, it was the way she changed when she was on it. Her shoulders would relax, a tiny smile would touch her lips, and sometimes a quiet laugh would escape her. It was a warmth, an engagement, a lightness that was completely absent when she was with me. With me, she was often withdrawn, tired, almost distant. With her phone, she was alive. One night, I tried to address it, not the phone directly, but the distance. We were in bed, the lights out. She was, predictably, on her phone, scrolling through something. I reached for her hand, intertwining our fingers. "Hey," I whispered, "we haven't really connected lately. I miss us." She pulled her hand away, gently, and set her phone down, face up, but still visible in the dim light. She turned onto her side, facing away from me. "I'm just really tired, James. Work has been insane. Can we just sleep?" I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. "It just feels like you're always on your phone, Maya. Like you're more interested in whatever's happening on there than with me." She sighed, a heavier, more exasperated sound this time. "Don't you start, James. I'm exhausted. I don't need you pressuring me too. I just need some space, okay? Some peace." Pressuring her. The words stung. I rolled onto my back, staring at the ceiling. The phone, still lit faintly on her nightstand, pulsed with a new notification. She picked it up again, almost immediately, and her back was to me. I heard the faint tapping, the quiet hum of her engagement with a world I wasn't a part of. I couldn't see her face, but I knew that smile was there. That private, vibrant smile she showed only to her screen. And in that moment, lying awake in the dark, feeling the vast, silent chasm between us, I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that it wasn't just work. It couldn't be. Something was fundamentally wrong, and it was tied to that glowing rectangle in her hands. The chilling certainty from that night, lying next to Maya, stayed with me. It wasn't a fleeting thought. It settled deep in my gut, a heavy, cold anchor that pulled me down. I found myself watching her, not with affection, but with a new, clinical gaze, searching for confirmation of what my instinct already screamed. The phone, once a mere tool, had become a malignant presence in our home, a third party in our silent, strained existence. Her phone use only intensified. It wasn't just in the evenings anymore. I'd wake in the middle of the night to find her bedside lamp on, her face illuminated by that familiar blue glow, her thumb tapping silently. She'd jump, startled if I shifted in bed, quickly placing the phone face down or sometimes even sliding it under her pillow. She'd offer a sleepy excuse, just checking work emails, or couldn't sleep, watching a stupid video. But her eyes would be too bright, too alert, for someone who was supposedly struggling with insomnia. It felt like a performance, a clumsy cover. During breakfast, it was propped up against her coffee cup, usually muted, but sometimes a faint vibration would make her glance down, a flicker of interest crossing her features before she'd dismiss it with a vague gesture. Lunch, if we were both home, was often eaten in silence, her attention split between her food and her screen. She'd respond to my questions with monosyllables, her focus clearly elsewhere. The casual conversations we once shared over meals had evaporated, replaced by the quiet tap-tap of her fingers. The subtle changes began to accumulate, forming a disturbing mosaic. She started taking her phone into the bathroom with her, even for short trips. The door, which she'd always left ajar, was now firmly closed. I'd hear the faint murmur of her voice, low and indistinct, followed by a soft laugh, a sound I hadn't heard directed at me in months. When she emerged, she'd have that same faraway look, a ghost of the smile still lingering around her lips. If I asked who she was talking to, she'd say, "Just a work call," or "my sister." But the calls often felt too private, too hushed for casual conversations. Then there were the late nights. Maya had always been a dedicated architect, and long hours were part of her job, but now it felt different. She started working in the spare room more often, claiming she needed absolute quiet to focus. She'd take her laptop and, of course, her phone, and disappear behind a closed door for hours. The familiar glow would seep from under the door late into the night. Sometimes I'd fall asleep alone, only to wake much later and find her still there or having slipped into bed, facing away from me. I tried to bridge the gap. I suggested a date night, a weekend getaway, anything to rekindle the spark that felt like it was suffocating under the weight of her preoccupation. Each suggestion was met with the same dismissive tone. "James, I'm exhausted. You know how demanding my job is." Or, "I just need some space. Can you not pressure me so much?" The word pressure became her go-to defense, a shield she used to deflect any attempt at intimacy or inquiry. It made me feel like I was the problem, that my longing for connection was unreasonable. Her defensiveness around the phone intensified too. If I walked past and she was holding it, she'd instinctively angle it away, or quickly lock the screen. It was a subtle, almost imperceptible movement, but I noticed. It happened every time. One evening she left her phone on the kitchen counter while she went to grab something from the pantry. A notification popped up, a banner across the top of the screen. Before I could even read the first few words, she was back, snatching it up with a sharp intake of breath. Her eyes met mine, wide and accusatory. "Don't touch my phone, James," she said, her voice unusually sharp. "It's my private space." "I wasn't going to touch it, Maya," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, but my heart was pounding. "A notification just popped up." She mumbled something about privacy and trust, and walked away, her back rigid. The incident left a bitter taste in my mouth. It wasn't just about the phone. It was about the immediate assumption of guilt, the harshness of her tone, the sheer possessiveness over something that used to lie openly between us without a second thought. I began to question everything. Had I become overly sensitive? Was I projecting my own insecurities onto her perfectly innocent habits? Maybe she really was just stressed from work, and my constant pressure was indeed adding to her burden. I tried to convince myself that I was being paranoid, that I was imagining things, but the evidence of my own eyes and ears, the growing emotional void, the guarded behavior, it all gnawed at me. One day, she mentioned having to meet a client for a late dinner. "It's a new project, James. Really important," she explained, already walking towards the door, her phone clutched in her hand. "I might be late." She looked different that night. Her hair was styled, not just tied back in her usual workday ponytail. She wore a dress I hadn't seen in a while, a little more effort than she usually put in for a client dinner. She kissed my cheek, a quick, almost perfunctory peck, and left. I tried to busy myself, but I couldn't shake the feeling. I cooked dinner for myself, then sat on the couch, half watching TV, half listening for her car. Hours passed. It was well past midnight when she finally came home. She was quiet, her movements subdued. She said the dinner had gone well but seemed evasive when I asked for details about the client or the project. "It's just complicated, you wouldn't understand," she said, yawning, already heading towards the bedroom. Before she fully disappeared, I noticed something. A faint scent, unfamiliar, not her usual perfume, clinging to her clothes. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, a hint of something clean, masculine, and entirely out of place. That smell, faint as it was, hit me harder than any of the other clues. It was a physical thing, something I could almost grasp. It wasn't just a change in behavior or a guarded look. It was a foreign element, introduced into our shared space. It lingered in the air around her, a silent accusation. My mind raced, trying to rationalize it, dismiss it, but I couldn't. The phone, the smiles, the secrecy, the distance, and now this. I lay in bed next to her, staring at the ceiling, feeling an icy knot tighten in my chest. The certainty from before solidified into something colder, harder. It wasn't just something wrong anymore. It felt like something broken, perhaps beyond repair. That lingering scent, the one I'd caught on Maya's clothes after her client dinner, was a raw, physical thing. It burned through my attempt at sleep that night, keeping me staring at the ceiling, my heart a dull, heavy thud against my ribs. I tried to rationalize it away. Maybe it was a new cologne on a colleague she'd just shaken hands with, or from a crowded restaurant. But the faintness of it, combined with the way it seemed to cling to her, made those explanations feel hollow. It felt like something intimate, something that had been too close for too long. The next few days were a blur of forced normalcy. I moved through our house, through our routines, like an actor playing a part, every word and gesture carefully calibrated. But inside, I was no longer an actor. I was an observer. The easygoing James, the one who tried to coax Maya out of her shell, was gone. In his place was a quiet, calculating presence, watching, cataloging, searching for patterns. I felt a cold detachment growing, a painful separation from the woman I shared my life with. Maya, for her part, seemed oblivious to my internal shift. Or perhaps, she simply didn't care. Her phone remained her constant companion, a digital extension of herself. It was always there, on the kitchen counter during breakfast, tucked under her arm as she walked to the bathroom, face down on her nightstand. I noticed she had started using a screen protector that made it difficult to glimpse anything from an angle, and her habit of quickly flipping it over if I entered a room intensified. Her explanations for her late nights at work became more frequent and more vague. A deadline came up, or a problem with a client's schematics. I stopped asking for details, knowing I would get the same dismissive response, often coupled with a hint of exasperation. "You know how architecture is, James," she'd say, her eyes already drifting back to her screen. The more I stayed silent, the more she seemed to relax into her new patterns, unaware of the quiet storm brewing within me. One evening, I was doing the dishes, and Maya was on the couch, headphones on, laughing softly at something on her phone. It wasn't the polite, social laugh she used with colleagues. It was a genuine, unrestrained chuckle, the kind that used to be reserved for our inside jokes. My hands froze in the soapy water. I had almost forgotten what that sound was like, directed at me. When she finally took off her headphones, she still had that relaxed, post-joy expression. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. She glanced up, the smile fading almost instantly. "Just a funny video someone sent," she said, already tapping her screen, her face closing off. The warmth was gone, like a light suddenly switched off. The phone didn't just absorb her attention, it seemed to dictate her schedule. She started taking it with her everywhere, even to the shower sometimes, placing it on the vanity just outside the glass. The bathroom, once a shared space for late-night talks or getting ready together, became another private sanctuary for her device. I'd hear the muffled sounds of typing or the faint chime of notifications, even as the water ran. It felt like a physical barrier, more impenetrable than the steamed-up glass. Then there was the small change in her appearance, nothing drastic but noticeable if you were looking. A new scarf, a different shade of lipstick she usually didn't wear, or a blouse I didn't recognize, paired with a subtle, softer perfume that wasn't her usual signature scent. I didn't question it, but the observations added to the growing list of small, unsettling discrepancies. It was as if she was preparing herself for something, or someone, external to our life. The financial aspect was the next quiet whisper. I was reviewing our joint credit card statement, something I typically did every few months to keep tabs on household expenses. We had always been transparent about our spending. Tucked between grocery bills and utilities, I saw a charge from a small, upscale coffee shop. Not unusual on its own, but it was in a part of town she rarely went to, far from her office or our home. And it wasn't a single coffee. It was a larger amount, enough for 2 gourmet lattes and perhaps a pastry. It could have been a client meeting, I reasoned, but the timing was late morning on a Tuesday. Not a typical client lunch, and it felt out of place for her usual routine. I highlighted it mentally, another quiet flag. My sleep continued to suffer. I'd lie awake, listening to the soft glow from under our bedroom door as she stayed up later and later in the living room, always with her phone. Sometimes she wouldn't come to bed until well after 2 a.m. When she did, she'd slip in silently, careful not to wake me, or so she thought. But I was already awake, already listening, already counting the minutes she'd been elsewhere. The silence in our room became heavy, thick, with unspoken questions. One afternoon, I came home earlier than usual. Maya was still at work, or so I thought. Her car wasn't in the driveway. I had planned to surprise her with takeout, hoping to break the ice, maybe even get her to put the phone down for an hour. But as I pulled up, I noticed her purse was still on the entry table, and her usual work bag was missing. Her car was gone, which confused me. She never left her purse behind, unless she was just running a quick errand. I checked the garage. Her car was definitely not there. My stomach tightened. Where was she? I called her, and she answered on the third ring, her voice a little breathless. "Hey, babe, what's up? Just finishing up a quick meeting. Be home soon." She sounded cheerful, but also a little distant, like she was distracted. "Oh, okay," I said, trying to sound casual. "Just wondered if you wanted to grab some dinner." "Sure, sounds good," she replied. "I'll text you when I'm on my way." She arrived home about 40 minutes later. She looked refreshed, almost vibrant, and was humming a light tune as she walked in. She was carrying a small, discreet shopping bag from a boutique I didn't recognize, a place that sold artisanal candles and high-end bath products, not typically her style. "What's in the bag?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. She jumped slightly, as if she hadn't expected me to be there. "Oh, just a small gift for a client. A thank you for a referral," she said quickly, tucking the bag behind her back. Her eyes darted away. It was a flimsy explanation. She usually had the firm order flowers or gift baskets for client referrals. The following week brought the inevitable argument. I tried, one last time, to talk about us. I picked a quiet evening, no phones after dinner. "Maya," I started, "I feel like we're drifting apart. I miss you. I miss us." Her face hardened. "James, we've talked about this. I'm stressed, I'm tired, you're constantly pressuring me, and it makes me feel suffocated. I need space." Her voice was sharp, defensive. The accusation of pressuring me hit different now. It didn't feel like a genuine plea for understanding. It felt like a shield, an excuse to maintain distance, to protect whatever she was doing. That night, lying next to her, the gulf between us felt wider than ever. The house, once filled with our shared life, now felt like a stage for two strangers performing a painful play. I was exhausted, mentally drained from the constant vigilance, the quiet detective work. I knew, with a heavy, cold certainty, that the distance wasn't about stress or her demanding job. It was about something or someone else. The pieces were still scattered, but they were starting to form a coherent, terrifying picture. The moment came a few days later. Maya was in the kitchen, making tea. Her phone, which she'd taken off the charger, was resting on the counter beside her, unlocked. For once, it wasn't face down. She turned to get milk from the fridge, her back to the phone. I was walking through, on my way to the living room, not even looking at it deliberately. But as I passed, my eyes involuntarily flickered to the screen. It was a messaging app, and the screen was open to a conversation. Just a split second, a flash, before she turned back and scooped it up. But it was enough. Enough to see a name at the top of the chat window. Alex. Not a client I recognized. Not a colleague from her firm. And beneath the name, a short recent message, still visible before she swiped it closed. It read, "Can't stop thinking about last night." Winking face. The emoji, the name, the casual intimacy of the message. It all hit me like a physical blow. The air left my lungs, my blood ran cold. I felt a dizzying lurch, the kind you get when the ground disappears beneath your feet. I walked into the living room, numb, my mind replaying the image. Alex. Can't stop thinking about last night. The faint scent. The distant laughter. The hidden phone. It wasn't just stress. It wasn't just pressure. It wasn't just a phone. It was real. It was a person. And my world, which I had been trying so desperately to hold together, just shattered into a million icy fragments. The silence that night was different. It wasn't the usual comfortable quiet of a shared home, or even the tense, empty quiet that had become our normal. This was a heavy, suffocating silence. It pressed in from every corner of the house, a physical weight on my chest. I couldn't unsee the message. Alex. Can't stop thinking about last night. The little winking emoji. It played on an endless loop in my mind, each repetition twisting the knife a little deeper. I didn't sleep. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, every memory of Maya filtered through this new, brutal lens. Her tiredness. Her distant gaze. The phone. Always the phone. It wasn't a distraction from her demanding job. It was a connection to another life, a life I wasn't in. The coldness I'd felt from her wasn't just stress. It was a wall she was building, brick by emotional brick, to protect her secret. The accusations of me pressuring her, of being insecure, they were shields, designed to push me away while she pulled someone else closer. When the first light of dawn crept through the blinds, I got out of bed. Maya was still asleep, facing away from me. I looked at her back, this woman I had loved for 8 years, this person who was a stranger to me now. There was no anger, not yet. Just a vast, aching emptiness. A profound sense of loss for something that was already gone, but only now truly severed. I went to the kitchen, made myself a cup of coffee, and sat at the counter, waiting. Waiting for her to wake up, waiting for the inevitable. The truth, once glimpsed, demands to be seen clearly. She came into the kitchen about an hour later, dressed for work, her phone already clutched in her hand. She glanced at me, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes, then looked away, heading for the coffee maker. "Morning," she said, her voice flat, just like always. I watched her. The same familiar movements, the same practiced distance. It was all a performance now. "We need to talk, Maya," I said, my voice sounding calm, even to my own ears. It surprised me. I expected it to crack, to shake, but it was steady. She sighed, a familiar gesture of annoyance. "James, I'm already running late. Can this wait?" She didn't look at me, focused instead on pouring her coffee. "No, it can't," I replied. "This can't wait another minute." She finally turned, her eyebrows furrowed. "What is so urgent?" I picked up my phone, not to show her anything, but just to have something in my hand, something to ground me. "I saw your phone last night," I said, my gaze unwavering. "The message from Alex." The color drained from her face. Her hand, which had been reaching for the sugar, froze mid-air. The phone in her other hand tightened, her knuckles white. She swallowed hard, her eyes darting around the room, anywhere but mine. The mask she'd worn for so long slipped, revealing a raw, panicked vulnerability. "What are you talking about?" she tried, her voice a thin whisper. It was the same old denial, but this time it was utterly hollow. "Don't," I cut her off gently. There was no point in playing this game. "Don't pretend, Maya. Not anymore. I saw it. Can't stop thinking about last night. And that little winking emoji. I've seen enough." She dropped her gaze to the floor, her shoulders slumping. The phone she held slid from her grasp, landing with a soft thud on the tiled floor. It was a gesture of surrender. "James, She started, then trailed off, her voice thick with something I couldn't quite decipher. Shame? Regret? Fear? It didn't matter. "All of it," I continued, the words coming out slowly, deliberately. "The late nights, the client dinners that ran too long, the tired excuses, the way you'd light up for your phone, but freeze up when I touched you, the perfume, the coffee shop, the little boutique shopping bag. It all makes sense now. Every single lie, every dismissal, Every moment you made me feel like I was the problem. It was all just to cover this." She finally looked up, tears welling in her eyes. "I'm so sorry," she choked out. It was a whisper, barely audible. "I didn't mean for this to happen." "Didn't mean for it to happen?" I asked, my voice rising slightly, the calm finally cracking. "Maya, you actively chose this. You made choices every single day that led to this. You chose to lie to me. You chose to make me feel crazy for seeing what was right in front of me." The anger was starting to surface, a cold, hard knot in my stomach. She started to cry then, soft, ragged sobs. I know I messed up. I felt so disconnected, and Alex, he made me feel seen again, like I used to feel with you." The comparison stung, a bitter irony. "And how did you expect me to feel, Maya?" I asked, my voice flat again. "While you were feeling seen by someone else, I was here, trying to connect with you, trying to fix us, begging for a crumb of the attention you gave your phone. You told me I was pressuring you. All I wanted was my wife back." She couldn't meet my eyes. She just stood there, shoulders shaking, tears streaming down her face. And in that moment, seeing her broken, I felt no triumph, no satisfaction, only profound sadness. The life we had built, the future we'd planned, it was all crumbling around us. It felt like watching a slow-motion disaster unfold. "Who is he, Maya?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I even wanted to know the details. The name Alex was enough. She hesitated. "He's a colleague from the office next door. We met on a project." Of course. The demanding architect meeting someone through work. So cliché and yet so devastatingly real. All the time she said she was working late, or at a client site. The pieces clicked into place with brutal efficiency. "I can't stay here," I said, the words heavy but firm. "Not like this. I need you to understand that this isn't something we can just work through right now. The trust is gone, completely shattered." She looked up, her eyes wide with fresh tears. "Where will you go?" "I'll figure it out," I replied, walking over to the coat closet. I grabbed my overnight bag. "I'll pack some things, stay with a friend for a while. We can talk about the house, everything else, later, when I can breathe." As I walked away towards the bedroom, I heard her call my name, a broken sob. "James, please." But I couldn't stop. I couldn't turn back. Every step away from her felt like an escape, an effort to save whatever sliver of myself was left. The sound of her crying faded as I entered our bedroom, the room we had shared for years. It felt cold, empty, a monument to a love that had died, a slow, silent death, hidden behind a glowing screen and a forced smile. I packed essentials, clothes, my laptop, a few books. My movements were methodical, almost robotic. I didn't rush, I didn't slam things. There was just a quiet resolve. The silence in the house, once suffocating, now felt like a necessary buffer. I was creating distance, physical and emotional, a space to process the wreckage. As I zipped up my bag, I looked around the room one last time. The photos on the dresser, our wedding picture, a snapshot from a long-ago vacation. They mocked me with their images of happiness, of a shared life. I had tried so hard to understand, to bridge the growing gap, to rekindle what I thought we had. But the truth was, she had already left. She had been gone for a long time, smiling her private smiles at a screen, sharing her vibrant self with someone else, while I was left with the cold, tired shell. I picked up my bag and walked back through the house. Maya was still in the kitchen, curled up in a chair, phone still on the floor, head in her hands. She didn't look up as I passed. I paused at the front door, the key in my hand. It was the key to a home I no longer recognized, a life that had become a painful illusion. I opened the door and stepped out, into the stark, unforgiving light of a new day, leaving behind the ghost of our past and the shattered pieces of a future I once believed in. The silence followed me out, but this time, it was a silence I chose.